Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And welcome everybody to another episode of the Critical Blast podcast. I don't know, it's got a different name every time I start a show. We're happy that you guys are joining us tonight. And tonight we are going to talk with a crowdfunded comic book creator, Charlie's London. And this one's going to be an interesting one because this is not a superhero kind of story or a battle bots kind of story. This is going to be something that's actually more up my alley because it's to be a little bit more historical. And to welcome to the chat to discuss this, we're going to talk with Charlie's London. Charlie, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, I think. Night's still young, so things could change, and it has been quite a weekend online as far as crowdfunded comic books and the CG comic books have been going.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot to talk about, and I think everybody's talked about it.
Yeah, everyone's. I think it's done its course. I think there are still people over there that are talking about it, and I definitely think, as I've said on my own streams, there's people that are talking about it that can talk about it a lot better than I can. So I'm much better off sticking to what I know best, which is this book that I want to bring out.
Absolutely. I understand that too. I've got theories about what's been going on as well, and they don't line up with anybody else's, so I'm probably wrong or I'm a genius, and the odds are against me on that last one. So Charlie's London is it's biography, right? This is a researched book.
Yeah, and it's going to be slightly different to there are. One of the things when I put my idea forward to the Chaplin estate, because I've known them for many years and I've done various different things with them over the years, when I put it forward, they actually said to me, there are other comics that exist. So the idea was, I emailed them and I said, I really want to do this project. And they said, well, this exists and this exists and so on and so forth. How's yours going to be any different? Because from a business point of view, they're not going to want something coming out that's exactly the same. And I pretty much pitched the idea to them, and they said they loved the idea because it's the way I want to tell the story is completely different to how it's been done before. And the other ones that are actually out, the other one that's recently been translated into English that's actually started off as a French book is a children's comic book. Even the style of the artwork is very something you would give a small child, the language and so on. So I think they're quite excited about an adult graphic novel that's gonna not be shy to look at the sort of different themes and things that were around his life, and and I think that's going to be really, really cool.
So the first thing I want to find out is why. What drew you to Chaplin? You're a young woman, having an idea to follow out this historical figure. It's sort of akin to finding teenage girls with pictures of Rudolph Valentino in their room. It's very anachronistic.
It's all to do with the fact that when I was researching my my family history about 10-15 years ago, I actually found that there's a photo that exists of my great-great-uncle sat in a workhouse in Lambeth. Hanwell, actually it's in Hanwell, not Lambeth. There is a workhouse in Lambeth that Chaplin went to, but it wasn't the same one. So this Hanwell boys' school, and sat in this photo with him was my great-great-uncle. So I found out that they didn't know each other. They weren't friends. It wasn't like it was a friendship that lasted a lifetime, and we've got a 10-ton of stories to tell about him. It was more to do with the fact that for this very fleeting moment in their lives, they were both in the same place. And it got me really thinking, is there something about this man's sense of humour that is geographical? Is, growing up in South London, is it something that is part of his story? So I started to look at sort of the lives of people that lived in and around London in the Victorian times, which is essentially what it was. It was 1896 that he was in that boys' home. And I started to think, I started to look at how these people's lives were shaped, what things they endured, what was life like before there was a welfare system, before there was a national health system. And I found that the experiences that he lived through were very similar to the ones that I know that my own family lived through. So it started off like that, and it became a really amazing journey. I've been to Italy giving talks about how people in London saw Chaplin at different times of his career. I've been to various different festivals in and around the world presenting things on him. I've run my Twitter for nearly 10 years now, and the reason it's called Charlie's London is I literally used to blog about going to the different parts of London that still exist that were inspirations for his films. And then I got involved in like the crowdfunding comics scene through my fiance, who was very interested in it. And I met people like Ethan, like John Maylan, like the CG UK guys as well. And I just started to think, why not a comic? Why not why not expanding his life to a new audience? Because the two comprehensive books that exist are big books. And if you really want to learn a little bit more about this man, looking at the sheer size of these books might put you off if you're only a casual reader. And so I just thought, if I could create something, a part of his legacy and the archive of material out there, that someone could pick that up first, and then they could see the information that I cite and the way that it's written, and then they want to go and explore those two other books, then fantastic. That's my job done. So that's been the plan.
I know that your sole focus is Charlie Chaplin, because it's I'm not going to say obsession. That carries all kinds of bad connotations. It's a love. It's a love.
Mm-hmm.
But we have these little chapter books over here in the States that middle schoolers get, which are all about, who was George Washington, who was Abraham Lincoln, who was Marilyn Monroe. And they're very easy read biographies. But I would think that a collection of comic books that could do the same thing would be even more accessible. And perhaps, Charlie's London might be a launching point for other people to spring out and do these other kinds of historical biography comics.
I mean, the Chaplin estate are brilliant with these sorts of things. I mean, I know for a fact that one of the things that they do love to do is look at different products and look at different ways of, keeping his memory and his story alive. So when I approached them with this idea, they just liked the fact that this was going to be bringing this to a new generation, which I think is equally as important as, a new bit of merchandise, shall we say. And I think that there is books that exist, as you say, about that who was, and I'm pretty sure I've got one actually. It's a very, very basic one. But again, it tells the story in a very, as I call it, once upon a time way. So it will start with the year of his birth. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be thematic. So I wanted the story to be told in that you understand why he made the certain decisions in his life that he did, because there was a bigger force that was driving it. And it was his inner conflict about maybe what he felt. Oh, hey, Stato, that's Statistical Zero, one of my favorite people in the world, who I've spoken to about Chaplin so many times. He's a massive film fan as well, so it's a pleasure to have him around.
I agree. It is a crime the chat isn't full. We're the least watched, most broadcast show there is out there.
Oh, well,
I'm always shocked when somebody says they'll come on.
Well, hopefully I've put the link out, so hopefully we'll get a few more. So I wanted the theme is going to literally be everything that he does, everything that he did was because there was a higher purpose. So whether he was guided by his emotions, whether he was guided by the psychological impact that his childhood had on him, the things that he saw, people that he met, different experiences that shaped his life. I want people to see behind that. I want people to look at his films in a different way. I want them to think that the reason he had this obsession with redemption, and the idea that he had the constant theme of the fallen woman in his films, and how she redeems herself, and she redeems herself a lot of the time on her own. It's not with a male influence or society giving her a helping hand. She actually does it herself, and I think that he saw that. He saw that a lot. He definitely saw that with his mum, and that's exactly what I wanna get across. I want people to put it down and go, oh, hey, Mark. I want, and also Nova Blast. Hello, Nova Blast. I want people to see that. I want them to put that book down, and I think the big thing for me is I want them to put it down, and I want them to sit there for a minute and reflect about it, because I want it to be so much more than a comic book.
I was going to ask if, when you said that this was a recurring theme, if there was something in his family life that might have inspired him to always go fall on that. And you mentioned he saw it with his mother. What's the story there? What was that redemption arc for him?
Hannah if you was to look at her on paper, 3 children by 3 different men, ended up in an insane asylum, and pretty much it is concluded that she died of neurosyphilis. You'd probably say she was considered by Victorian standards to be a loose woman, but that's so far from the truth about Hannah Chaplin. Hannah Chaplin was an incredibly troubled figure. She married his father very young. They were both music hall performers. By all accounts, she was incredibly beautiful. He was incredibly charismatic, but where she was incredibly flirtatious, he also had a penchant for drink. So their relationship was incredibly tempestuous, and she already had a child by somebody else who had run off and left her. It seems that Hannah fell in love very easy. She fell in love with the idea of love rather than falling in love with the men that were giving the love out. And she meets, so she marries Charlie Senior, because his name was also Charles Chaplin, and it was very much a case of can't live with her, can't live without her. And he went off and toured in America when the Charlie we know, was about 1 year old, and she had an affair with somebody else, and because she felt like she wasn't getting the love and attention. And when he returned, they split up, and they got divorced. And she actually then fell in love with the man that she had the affair with. She started having a proper relationship with, Leo Dryden, and they had a son called Wheeler Dryden. And this is the event that they reckon really tipped Hannah over the edge, because no one knew what postnatal depression was and those things back then, but by all accounts Hannah had it. And one day Leo comes in, she has got the baby little boy in her arms, he's no older than 6 months old, and literally he rips the child out of her arms, takes the child away, moves to Australia, and she never sees that small boy until he's in his 40s, many years later, when Charlie happens to track him down. So it's believed that was the first thing that sort of set her off to a very long very long downward spiral of mental health. She stopped performing on stage, because every time she went on stage she'd get stage fright and she couldn't sing, because she wasn't earning any money. The beautiful apartment that they stayed in, and obviously both men had left her, she couldn't afford the rent. They went into the most horrible of Victorian lodgings. If you could just think of Oliver Twist, you're like, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
And she just had to start selling anything that she had to be able to keep her boys, the 2 boys she had, Sydney and Charlie, in clothes, in food. They very rarely went to school, because they couldn't afford to. She couldn't afford to send them to school. No schools were free. She still had to clothe them. They lived in the end. They lived in somewhere called Pownall Terrace, which was literally it was an attic of a 4-story house that somebody rented out. So she went from, if you imagine the most luxurious of apartments, being on the stage, fine clothes, all those things, to living in a hovel. And then there is some talk, even though it's not been proven, that she may have turned to prostitution in order to keep food on the table for the boys. And then her mental health was just declining the whole time, to the point that she made a decision that if I'm going to make sure these boys are looked after, she took them to a boys' home and she handed them in, and she put herself into a poorhouse for women, and she put the boys into a boys' home for them, because she wanted to keep them together, and she wanted them to stay wanted them to stay together. She wanted them to at least get the care and be looked after that they needed, but she knew she couldn't do it herself, which really I think takes a lot of bravery and a lot of guts to admit in a time like that, when there's so much stigma anyway. Her mental health was really bad. She ended up being in and out of asylums. She never really recovered, to the point that she just went further and further into her own mind. And when Chaplin hit his fame in the 10s and in the 20s, he took her to America with him, and she did actually spend the last couple of years of her life living in luxury. But the very sad thing was that by all accounts, she didn't remember it. Some days she didn't even remember who they were. So incredibly sad story. But she was a very strong woman in her own right. When she realized that she couldn't look after them, she'd do little things like she pretended to find religion. She pretended to be like a born-again Christian, so that she could go to the churches and the soup kitchens and get them food. And they used to sit in the back of the church pretending to read the Bible, so that they were in a warm place out of the rain, because they didn't have lodgings at the time. So all of these things must have ultimately had an effect on his films, because how could they not if you've lived like that?
Sure. Now, does any of that play a role in your book, or is that do you start somewhere later in his life and move forward from there?
Well, I start in the 50s, because he returns to London in 1952 for the premiere of his film Limelight, which many people actually consider to be quite semi-autobiographical, even though the character is, it's not really, it's only very loosely based on him. But Calvero has this, he's a washed-up comedian that's seen better days, and in his 50s, nearly 60, Chaplin felt like that. He was already being, ostracized from America for supposedly being a communist. He did something that he very rarely did with Limelight. He premiered the film in Leicester Square in London. Now, most of them have been premiered in Los Angeles. So he came to London, and it was while he was here, he discovered that if he was to return to America, he would have to go in front of the Senate of Un-American Activities. He refused. He said, "I'm not doing that. I've paid my taxes for 40 years. I don't see why anyone thinks they can put me in front of this. It's humiliating." So he just returned. He refused to go back. It's often been misquoted that he was kicked out of America. He wasn't. But ultimately, the truth is, if he had have returned and he had have gone in front of that court, he would have been kicked out. So I think he jumped before he was pushed. So when I said about themes, that was one of the themes I wanted to start with. So there's a story that he went to a party at the Ritz that one of the nights while he was in London, and he got very bored of the party, and he was very restless, and he had all this going round in his head. So he decided to have a walk around the streets of London that he remembered from his childhood. And so that's where my book is basically going to be the core of, is that you're going to go on his journey around the streets of London, and you're going to go back to his Victorian childhood. And that's why I say everything's in themes, because you won't necessarily see his life in order. You'll see it jump between the 50s and then maybe the 20s and then the Victorian times. And working quite closely with the artist that I'm working with, and also my colorist who's Ink Spots, who's going to be doing who's doing Cash Grab as well for Cecil. With what we've decided is that the 1950s stuff is going to be in color, and then the Victorian stuff is going to be in sepia, and his black and white era, his silent film era, is going to be in black and white. So when you're going to these different parts of his story, you know where you are because you know of the colors that are being used, and obviously he'll look different and so on. But that's the way it's going to run. I specifically want to tell his story from a completely different angle.
That's a brilliant way of communicating time, is using those color palettes to do that.
Oh, thank you.
I especially like sepia for the Victorian era because photography was just in its infancy. In fact, I have my own Victorian character that I studied for years and years, which was Charles Dodgson. And the first book I ever had published was an Alice in Wonderland pastiche. Purported. It's written as though it's the third Alice book that he never had published, that he was going to give to Alice Little and Reginald Hargraves as a wedding present. And it was too academic, I think. It's the story, but then I tried to do what Martin Gardner did with the annotated Alice, where he said, hey, this is more than just a fairy tale. This was like an inside joke to a little girl, and here's all the stuff that no one else got but her. So I did that with this. I had all the footnotes out to the side as though it was a real discovery. In fact, the preface of the book is like, we renovated Christ Church at Oxford, and we found some papers that had fallen behind an old shelf, and math doodles and this manuscript. And it's funny, I was living in Arkansas at the time, in a small town in the South, and when Telos Publishing in the UK agreed to publish this, I was over the moon. So when the copies came in, I made sure that my local paper got a copy of the book for review. And a week later, they're like, yeah, we'd like to talk to you. First thing the guy says when he sits down with me at the library is like, so when they found these papers, why did they call you?
Oh.
Like, oh dear. I appreciate the fact that you fell for the lie, but no, he didn't really write this. I really wrote all this. It was a technique. But yeah, studying the Victorian era, you're far more familiar with it than I am, with all the work that you've done with Chaplin. But it wasn't a very forgiving era, morally speaking. So I can understand the stress that someone like Hannah Chaplin would have endured with the life she had handed to her.
Yeah, I want it to be very much. I don't think that some people have painted her in a very friendly light, if they've actually done any digging on her at all. But the thing is that people don't realise is one of his most famous films is The Great Dictator. And yes, it's one of those ones that is, when anything, yeah, exactly. When anything political happens, and you see it all the time on social media, the amount of people that actually use that speech, and you know what, the amount of people that use that speech on something and they don't even realise it's Charlie Chaplin because he's dressed in a completely different way. And if you actually, they always, give the most famous part of that speech, and they always cut off with the cheering at the end. But if you actually go further than the cheering to Paulette Goddard laying on the grass crying, it cuts back and Hinkle says, Hannah, can you hear me? Because the character in The Great Dictator, the female character, is called Hannah and named after his mum. And the idea is that they believe that he's not only saying, Hannah, can you hear me, to Paulette Goddard's character, but it's like, look what I've done, mum. Look what I've achieved. So he was a very, very complex character. And I do, I'm under no illusion. He probably wasn't a very nice character at times as well, because he was an absolute control freak. Every single part of his films, he meticulously oversaw, right down to the makeup of the female leads. And one of the reasons why, as beautiful and amazing as City Lights is for the cinematography, there is no chemistry between him and his leading lady, Virginia Cheryl, because they hated each other. But he couldn't cast anybody else to play the blind girl as well as she could. So it's a very, very, he doesn't really speak about it very much. Equally, he doesn't massively speak in his autobiography about the circus, which I think is arguably one of his most amazing films. And the reason being is the set burnt down, his mother died, his second marriage split up, and he was caught having an affair with the leading lady, all in the space of about 6 weeks.
Ooh,
So he just doesn't, he just doesn't speak about it in his book at all.
Can't say that I blame him. Let
No.
people say what they want to say. One of the things about Chaplin is he's a very visually striking character, and I almost thought about wearing the microphone like this tonight, because there's only two people that anyone will ever associate that mustache with. It's Charlie Chaplin and the man he played in The Great Dictator.
Exactly. It's very, very true.
I can't help but wonder why he didn't shave it off later. Or did he?
Chaplin first wore it in 1914. Hitler first wore it in 1921. So
he stubbornly said, I had it first.
Yeah, and I think that the Tramp was so well established by then. And weirdly, I think in his own way, because he hated Hitler. I mean, there's only two men that I can think of in history that were so tunnel visioned all the way through the 30s that they were trying to tell people what this man was like and no one was listening. And that was Charlie Chaplin and Winston Churchill, who actually went on to become friends. So there is, I think there was a stubbornness of, well, I'm the Tramp. I have no connection to him. And also, I think that he quite liked the fact that by keeping that moustache, he was like poking the beast. Like he knew that people mostly associate outside Nazi Germany. He knew that people would be looking at Hitler with ridicule at the moustache. So I think in his own way, it was a little bit of a, like I say, he was prodding at him. But I know that Hitler hated him. And when The Great Dictator was made, it was, he hated him even more. So it is very interesting. Weirdly, when Chaplin found out about the concentration camps and what had gone on during the Holocaust after the Second World War, he apparently said many, many times, if I had known what was actually going on to the extent of the atrocities that were going on, I may never have made that film. So I think it's incredible to think one of the most famous speeches now, that's not even a political speech, it's made by a comedian, may never have happened had he have actually known the full extent of what was going on. There's
a science fiction B movie, and the title of it is escaping me. So maybe the chat will help me out here. Thematically, it was all about how Nazis had built a rocket and took a group of Nazis to the moon and established a base there on the dark side of the moon, where they'd been operating for years and years. And for whatever reason, they had The Great Dictator as a film, as a biofilm, and they did not see that it was a satire that was making fun of him. They were treating it as, this is, look at the honor they gave our great leader Hitler. They made this film about him, and they forced children to study it. I can't remember what the name of that film was, but it was supposed to be a comedy of some kind. It failed in a lot of levels, but it was very visually stunning.
Well, I think this is another thing that shows the grit of the British people, is that The Great Dictator was not very well received in America because there was this anti-communist, anti-Chaplin feeling that was, Hoover was already peddling at that time. And Britain was, especially London and places like Coventry, were going through the Blitz in a big way in 1940. And yet that film was massively widely received and embraced and loved by the people. I mean, my own grandmother, she was born in 1922, so she was 18 when the Blitz was in full swing. and she's told me that she saw it twice in the theatres, you know, and people loved it. And there's something about, to me, that shows the difference very much between British and American humour. In the fact of British humour is very dark. There is a tendency to make fun of adversity and the things that we go through. We're also a nation that the saying is a nation of piss takers, and it literally means we make fun of each other. You know, like if you ever watch one of the CG UK streams, people have actually said to me, you lot don't seem like you like each other. We're like, no, we really like each other, but that's the point of it. Like, we're meant to be like this. If we didn't like each other, the irony is with the British, if they don't like each other, they're actually really nice to each other, because they're stayed on that boundary of, yeah, I'm just going to make small talk and stay over this side of the fence. So and I think there's an element of that with Chaplin's humour as well. Like, you can see it. He's the Tramp is a very sarcastic arsehole, to be honest, at times, but in a jovial way, like, you know, the kicking the policeman up the backside, and the famous scene in it is the circus again, where the little kid has got the donut, and he's like making like little doe eyes at the kid and trying to make it laugh, just so he can get the bits of the donut off of its hand without the mum and dad noticing. There's an element of him that I think is hilarious like that. My fiance, one of his favourite skits that Chaplin does is it's called The Count. I think it's 1915. It's called The Count. And he does this thing where his wife has left him a note saying, I will only return to you when you've stopped your drinking. So he turns away from the camera and he's like shaking his shoulders and he's looking like he's crying. And it's not until he turns around you realise he's got a shaker in his hand and he's mixing a cocktail. So, but I mean, visually it's stunning. It's so clever. And I just don't. I watch him as many times as I've ever watched him and go, how did you think of those things? And how he thought of those things a lot of the time was his mum. She was, by all accounts, a great mimic. And in The Great Dictator, when he does that whole section of Liberty Stonker, that's an incredible satire of Adolf Hitler. It's insane. And apparently it all comes from when they were really poor. They used to go sit in the park or look out of their apartment window because they couldn't afford to really do anything. And anyone that walked by, she would make stories up of them. Oh, see, so-and-so, they've just gone out, they're doing this. And or she'd mimic the way they were walking down the street, and he copied her and he learnt it from her. So incredible stories.
Now, I'm guessing, because of your extensive history of working with Chaplin's history itself, and the talks you've given, that you've written a lot about Chaplin. I don't know, but
yeah, I have had a couple of papers published that are they're in the archives in Bologna, which are in the Chaplin archives in Bologna. I've also used to run a blog for many years looking at, like I say, the stuff to do with Charlie's London. This will be the first official publication that I've done of a commercial publication to do with Chaplin, because as much as I would love to be an official historian of him, there is a great man who's a mentor of mine, David Robinson, who much more deserves that title than I ever will. For one thing, he's the one that wrote the one of the extensive books that's on him. David Robinson wrote Chaplin, His Life and Art, which you won't beat. It is the complete comprehensive study of Chaplin. The other thing is, like, real life gets in the way. I mean, I spent many years training to be a teacher. I'm a history teacher when I'm not doing all the stuff on Chaplin, so that took up a lot of my adult time. But saying that, when I did my master's in history, my dissertation was on Chaplin. So my master's dissertation, I suppose you could say, is another published piece, because we in the UK, we have to get them published and bound and whatnot. So yeah. So yeah, it's I wish I'd have done more professionally, shall you say? But I think that's a great thing about working with the Chaplin estate is that they do know me enough to have trusted me with producing this, and for that I'll be forever thankful.
Now, did you find any challenges in adjusting your writing to the comic book script format?
No, because what I did was I used his autobiography for the narrative, and then I used the David Robinson's book for the sort of to set the scene, shall we say. So I just made sure that I kept true to those two books, because those two books are pretty much the world of Chaplin. And it's going to be the biggest Chaplin book ever, mark my words. I don't know about that, Stato. I don't think I'm going to let it be. I will always, in my heart and always in my promotions of anything, say that David Robinson's book will always be the most. Okay, we may let you have that one. We'll see. Yeah, David is 90. He is the most incredible man you will ever meet. He's been quite hands-on with my comic. Every picture that I've had commissioned, for covers, for prints, for any sequential artwork that will be produced, he has actually overseen everything. He knew Chaplin, and he's one of the team that worked on the Robert Downey Jr. film. So that's why I'm saying I feel that this has got a real nice, authentic piece of his history and anything published on him. So I'm really, really excited for it.
Can you show us any of the artwork and do a share here?
Yes, give me a minute. I will do. It's all.
I went to all this work to put this London cityscape here as a border, and you
I
went and had
know.
a black square. I'm like, I can't see any of it.
No, I
was worried actually that would obscure stuff anyway. So
no, I can see it all. It's absolutely brilliant. It's nice when someone makes that sort of effort for you. It's amazing. I love that sort of thing. Right. So if you share my screen now, that is my three covers. So we have the first cover is by Donald DeLay, and the colours are by Carl Ritter, who Donald was obviously quite famous for. He's the artist on Cecil's Cash Grab, and Kyle Ritter is very famous for colouring Cyberfrog, amongst other books. The middle one is by Vinnie Tartamella, who is famous for Through the Woods. He's also working on City of Venus. Colours are also by him, which is an absolute incredible. What I love about these covers is you've got the Donald one, which is the little boys in the distance, and then you've got Vinny's one where the tramp is in the forefront. So it gives a nice difference, and it gives a real good perspective of where he's come from and where he now is. And the London streets in the back of Vinny's ones are beautiful as well. And then the very last one on the right that you'll see there is by Carl Stefan, who wrote Mary Boys. Carl was in the chat. I don't know if he still is, but one of my CG UK brothers, he designed this. I love this one. I actually I've used all three of these in different things. For example, I have quite a successful Facebook page, Charlie's London. It is currently has Vinny's is the profile picture on there, and maybe less of a promo thing, but Carl will have a laugh at this. His one is the screen on my mobile phone home screen, because I love the face on it, the way that he's actually put the colours together, the way he's the black and white wash on there is stunning. Yeah. And what I love about
the one I back, I think.
Well, this is the thing. I've had so many people say to me, "We can't choose. So are you doing a tier with all three?" And I said, "I will. Yeah, I will do." Because I'll be honest, if I was on the other side of this, I wouldn't know which one to pick. They've each got something different. Like the
That's
one
why you do prints.
That is why you do prints as well. There will be prints available on the campaign, because people have said that to me as well. People have expressed virgin prints of all three of those covers. So I'm playing around with my tiers now to have a look at what I can actually come up with. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The Donald one, I think, is very much for the comic fan. From, you know, the sort of traditional, it's a very comic looking one. Vinny's one is very much, I think, for the traditional silent film fan. Or even just somebody getting new into Chaplin. It's probably one of the most iconic sort of images there. It is very, very much looks like him. And Carl's one is fun. Like Carl's one is, to me, you know, the theme of the story is London is his playground and London created him. So I think the fact that he sat on that sort of London premiere of one of his films looking down at people, I think if I was on the other side of this and I was a customer, I'd probably have to back all three because I couldn't decide.
Now, have you launched already? I didn't go to check.
No, I haven't. My mailing list has launched.
Okay.
But my my mailing list has launched, but my campaign does not launch until the 16th of October.
Oh, that's a ways out.
Yeah, there's a reason why I did that. The artist who I am working with, he is currently on other projects and he cannot start until about September. And I really, really, really wanted this particular artist. He's not known within CG. He's actually outside of CG, but he's a friend of Carl Stefan's who recommended him to me. And when I saw his artwork, he absolutely blew me away. It was exactly what I wanted. Everybody also within CG was working on other projects. So I couldn't get anybody within that I thought would emulate the style that I was looking for, which was really, really frustrating. And
did you tell your artist that once he does this, he's never going to get a job in the industry again?
No, I didn't, because I don't think that's going to be the case at all.
I don't either. I'm just having fun with the craziness that's been going on the last week.
I mean, as I've said over and over again, because this book is officially licensed, it's not a Comicsgate book. It can't be for obvious reasons. But
there is no official Comicsgate book. It's just books are done by Comicsgate people.
Yeah. But what I mean by that is that it's done by me, but it's technically owned by someone else. So, but I am, you know, I still, as I've said so many times on streams recently, I'm still very proud of the friends that I've made over here, and I'm still very much believe in the reasons that I came here. And no one's ever able to give me proof that this is a hate group. And until somebody gives me proof that this is a hate group, I'm not going anywhere. And I don't see them giving me that anytime soon. So I'm stuck here, and I'm quite happy with it.
I didn't hate anybody when I came into it, and by coming into it, I mean by making friends within it. I don't produce a comic book. I can't draw stick figures consistently from panel to panel. So, you know, I do write. I showed you the Alice book. I'm also, let me switch back over here for just a moment. I'm also the author currently on the Destroyer series, which is a series that's been running since 1971 about an American assassin, Remo Williams. There was a movie, 1985, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins, and that was based off the book series, and it's still ongoing, and I'm blessed to get to be a part of that. Warren Murphy and Richard Spear created it, and Warren actually passed away while making edit notes on my first manuscript for Bully Pulpit, and I kind of jokingly say that my writing was so bad it killed him when he saw that I was taking over.
But yeah, I mean, it is very, very much an interesting one, should we say. I was going to be really interested to see how it does. I mean, the reason I also picked the 16th of October is because that is the date of the premiere that was in London of Limelight. And also it sort of overlaps with, again, this weird interlinked family history we have, because it's my parents' wedding anniversary. So I thought that it was a nice, everything fitted really nice with it, because it's also the time over here when we're on school holidays. So which means that I can go on any stream at any time anyone wants to talk to me about my book, and and that sort of thing. So it means
Well,
that
hopefully we can get you back after the launch.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've always said that if whoever wants me to come on their stream, I 100% will. I mean, and funny enough, this is how this book has branched out to so many people. I'm going on streams to do with, within the silent film community and within like the slapstick community that I'm also quite big involved in. I mean, most people know me from Twitter, but my Facebook page has got over 5,000 followers. So I do most of my stuff actually over on with, to be honest, I'm quite active within the comics community, but you should see how active I am within the silent filming community. I'm more active over there. So I'm surprised that I ever sleep, to be honest.
It speaks to the broad appeal that this book is going to have. I mean, when you look at a Cyber Frog or any of the other ones, I always say, go with the flagship title because everyone's going to recognize it. That's going to appeal to comics fans. It's going to appeal to superhero comics fans specifically, and it's a very narrow niche to target, and it's done as well as it has. You have the opportunity here to not only hit the faithful CG buyers who just like to help out CG creators, and with that alone, that should do well enough if everyone gets it in backs. But again, you got the silent film creators, the slapstick not creators, but the silent film fans and the slapstick fans, the movie historians, who are all going to come in to get a comic book, which is probably something they don't do every Wednesday.
Yeah, it's true. I'm really excited because I've been to Chaplin's home, which is now a museum in Switzerland, and they have the most amazing gift shop there. I mean, Jesus, I ended up buying so much when I went there once that of all these different books and things that I'd never seen before, and like French and Swiss publications that have got English translations, and I'm one of these people that I have to read everything and get my hands on in case there's anything news come out. And then there was like official stuff that was in the shop and it was exclusive to the shop, and I was like, oh, I've got to have that. I spent so much and realized I couldn't bring it all home in my rucksack. I had to then get them to post it to the UK for me. Which was really funny. It didn't cost a huge amount actually, considering that what postage internationally is normally like. But it was, that was a shock when that box turned up, I can tell you. But I ended up speaking a couple of weeks ago to the estate again, and there's going to be the opportunity for them to have a retailer tier. So this book's also going to be in the shop hopefully, like fingers crossed, is going to be in the gift shop in Chaplin's home in Switzerland. So that's
wonderful.
Yeah, so there's that, and I'm going to be able to go over there and see that put into place. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for everybody else, it's like, gosh, if I could get my book on the shelf in a comic store, even my local comic store, my heart's beating fast. But to have your own work published and sitting alongside everybody else's in the the official Chaplin outlet for research material, that's just got to really be have you over the moon with that.
Yeah, it's pretty insane, really. I mean, I keep saying I don't know how the book's going to do. I don't know if it might be too niche for a comic audience, but I do know that when I've put it up on my Facebook and stuff, the silent film world has been quite excited about it, and also the comic world has been quite excited about it. So I'm just eagerly waiting. I can't wait for October, and I can't wait to start seeing the sequential art come to life. And I just think the fact that I'm going to be able to sit there and go, oh my God, like I wrote that. That's insane. Like,
there's nothing wrong with niche. Niche is good. At criticalblast.com, we review comics and movies and DVDs and such. And every once in a while, something comes in that's very, very, very niche. There's like a very small audience for this. But, those small audiences are faithful. And if I put out, a review of, like the last Harry Potter movie. I'm like, oh, this is huge. Everyone's gonna, everyone's interested in Harry Potter. Well, the thing is, me and 1,000 other sites doing the same thing here. So it gets diluted, and nobody comes, to this one. You get a couple thousand, and that's pretty much it. But when you put out, like a review of a DVD that was put out by an independent film agency that's about a band that travels the country once a year, and you're like, okay, well, we'll put that out there. There's 7,000 fans out there that they want every single thing that appears about them, and they will come. And I'll get more traffic out of a niche article than I will get out of a general audience article any day of the week, and I would gladly take them all day long.
Yeah, I mean, people have said to me, oh, but once you've done this, what do you see yourself doing as far as comic books goes? And I go, do you know what? If I never, ever write another comic again, and I just end up promoting all my friends and going on streams and promoting theirs on streams, I'm happy. Like, I never intended to be a long-time comic book creator. It was something I wanted to get out there in a way it's never been done before. Of course, if people like my writing and they want to hire me and say, you know what, we really want you to write this sort of story for X, Y, and Z, I'm not going to turn it down. But I'm not, I feel like that niche, that saying of everyone's got one good story in them, this is mine. And I 100% really believe this is mine. And I just, before you put it on the screen, I just read Nova Blast's comment, and that's the sort of people that resonate the most with me. Exactly. The people that this is personal to. And this is so personal to me. I mean, when we see all of the things that have been going on lately, Cecil losing his cover and other artists like nearly losing work because they are assigned with what people perceive to be a certain group a certain way. Well, at the end of the day, I'm not political. I've got no agenda. I want to tell the story of one of my heroes in a way that my grandmother would have wanted to read it. And if anybody, if there's a story at the moment about blacklisting and cancel culture that needs to be told, it's Chaplin's, because they tried to cancel that man so many times and he's still here. And that's what is important to me. Get that out there, because it is a story that's important. And I am really honored, Nova Blast, that you want to buy that for somebody, a veteran, something else that is so close to my heart. I do a lot of stuff for military charities in the UK. That's the sort of person that resonates. Absolutely.
Nova Blast and everybody else, the link to the mailing list on Indiegogo is the first thing you'll see in the description below. So definitely go out there and get your name on the mailing list so that when October rolls around, we gotta go through August and September yet. And, things happen. You might forget. Get on the mailing list and get reminded.
The great thing about these mailing lists now is you can add videos. And at the moment, I have my trailer, which is done by the Incredible Ascension Cinema. And at the bottom, I've got the sort of videos that I do in regards to Chaplin. So there's one on there called The Victorian Boy, which is about 10 minutes long, and it will give you sort of the background in where the tramp comes from. What I will start to do from next week is I will start to replace that video with sort of maybe 1-minute videos about updates for the campaign. So it might be a new print that is available, or this is a potential stretch goal for the campaign, or something like that. And I'm going to use that to keep it fresh, because it's really important with the fact that there's like 2 months to go that I do, try to keep it as fresh as possible. But I want to say thank you to everybody that signed up, because I have 555 names have signed up already on that mailing list. And that to me is just absolutely stunning and incredible.
Now, you said if you never write another comic, you'll be happy just getting this one out. Is this a one shot, or is this like multiple issues telling this story arc? And if it's a one shot, how big? Okay, so the first book, there's going to be 3 books. Each one ends with a return to London. There are 3 major returns to London in his career. And like I said, the thematic thing is to keep this moving in that sort of frame of mind of why it's called Charlie's London. So each one is going to be about 60 pages long. So the first one concentrates from that little part in the 50s, but mostly between 1889, when he was born, and 1921, when he returns to London, the most famous man in the world.
And then the next one will be the 20s and the 30s, and all of the, pretty much the second one is going to be the most scandalous one, because you've got the problems with his marriage. You've got there's going to be, obviously goes up slightly, it will go up to the beginning of the Second World War, probably with the making of the Great Dictator. I haven't decided on the second one yet, but there will be available, which I'm really excited about, with this first book. I have got somebody from CG UK called William Crawford Hazel, and he wrote a fantastic comic called Elsa Dark, which if you haven't seen that, you need to check it out, because it's absolutely fantastic. We're working together to create a one-shot for the first book, because what people don't know, or very few know, is that for a short space of time in Chaplin's career between 1910 and 1912, he toured America with the one and only Stan Laurel from Laurel and Hardy.
Oh my.
They didn't. People don't realise that they were friends. They started out together with Fred Carno, the Fred Carno Company in London, and it was a slapstick vaudeville show, and they toured America. So there is a one shot drawn by Wooly, as we call him, and it will detail the story of the friendship between Chaplin and Stan Laurel, and how pretty much this friendship helped to formulate the slapstick style that both of them would become quite famous for. Now, the idea was, I knew I had to include this story in my comic, but I knew if I wanted to keep it to a really tight and nice 60 pages, that if I was going to tell it, it was going to be really rushed, and I didn't want to rush this story. So what we did was we created it's a work in progress, so it's roughly about 24 pages, a one shot that when you get to a certain part in Chaplin's life, if you want to expand the universe to read about this part of his life, you'll read the one shot. But if it's something that's not interested, you're not interested in, then you can skip past it and go straight on to his Keystone and Creating of the Tramp and so on, because that's the period where it fits in between. We're not decided how it's going to fit in the campaign yet, but I'm pretty sure we've settled on the idea it's probably going to be a stretch goal. So you'll get it when it hits a certain stretch goal.
So by the time this is all over, the place in Switzerland is going to end up having 5 books with your byline on them, because I can see the 3 issues, the one-shot book with the Stan Laurel story. And then, of course, all 3 issues and probably the Stan Laurel story will be encapsulated into a trade paperback.
Yep, and there's talk about an art book, but it does depend.
Oh, wonderful! Do a hardcover. Yes.
Yeah, it does depend on how successful the campaign is. Because what I've done is I've tried to be sensible, because obviously we know from other experiences within crowdfunding comics that people overstretch themselves. I mean, originally I wanted this book to be 96 pages, and then I thought, but what happens if I don't fund 96 pages? I have to be realistic. So I've decided that the way that the story is written, where it ends in 1921, if for some reason I don't do another 2 books, it is a nice standalone story on how the tramp came to be the tramp. If it does get the attention that I really hope it does, and it ends up being able to generate the interest of another 2 books, then obviously his story is going to go on and tell his entire life. But if it doesn't, you've got a beautiful book that tells a story that hasn't been told in this way before. So I've tried to think of everything. And I will credit the absolutely fantastic John Mayland for that, because John Mayland gives the great advice about crowdfunding. And I can't remember the exact thing that he said, but he said on a stream once about thinking ahead and planning where you want your book to end or where you want it to be at a certain point. And that's why I came up with this idea. I thought was the best way to do it.
All right. And to be clear, the 3 covers we saw are 3 alternate covers for the first book. They're not the 3 covers for the 3 books. No,
they are 3 covers for the first book. There is also
so
going
you'll have
to be
9 books, I imagine, by the time it's all
Oh
done.
my God, who knows? It's a fantastic journey. But the other thing I want to say is I do have a pin-up that it hasn't. I don't have it yet, so I can't show it.
Okay.
But there is a pin-up that is going to be produced by the fantastic Billy Tucci for this book.
Everybody's getting in on this.
Billy is a massive Charlie Chaplin fan. We have formed a wonderful friendship because of our love of Charlie Chaplin and supporting the same English football team, which is funny. I approached him and said, is this a possibility? And he was like, 100%. So he's just obviously got to get his other campaigns and that fulfilled and stuff and finished. And then we're going to start working out exactly what we want. But yeah, he's an absolute star, and I can't thank him enough for that. So it is going to be amazing.
Yeah, Billy's great. We had him on here for Miss Fury a few weeks back, and he was instrumental in getting our channel up over that 1,000 subscriber hump. So I can't thank him enough for the help he gave us with that. Now we just need somebody to get us over the 4,000 hours hump, which is 3,000 hours away. So everybody watch this stream a lot and I really appreciate it. Just put it on a loop and go somewhere.
I'm in the same thing. I think my last count was, I think I'm on 682 subscribers, and my last count when I looked at the monetization thing, I've done 1,200 hours. So yeah,
I've equal on hours with us.
I got a way to go. I've got a way to go, but that's what the great thing about getting all the information up for my campaign and stuff is going to be in the next couple of months is, you can reach out to people and do these streams. And yeah, I mean, 100% is fun. It's definitely fun.
Well, we appreciate you being on here tonight. I'm just loving talking with all these different creators and their different takes on how to produce comics and the comics that they are making. This is one I want to get in on. So if I'm not, I think I'm already on the mailing list, but I'm going to double check and make sure that I'm on there, because those covers alone are just gorgeous, and I can't imagine what the inside's going to look like. And to learn more about Charlie Chaplin from somebody who's done as much research on it as you. I mean, this isn't some Classics Illustrated author who's been said, hey, get us a Charlie Chaplin book, and he goes out to the encyclopedia and starts just rattling.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely I always, when people often say to me about, like you said at the beginning of the stream, the word obsession, I always say it's not an obsession, for the simple fact that obsessions normally lead you into places that are unproductive. This has taken me on so many incredible journeys, including understanding why my own family are the way that they are, and growing up where I've grown up, and the way that people in South London are. Paul Jenkins,
it's a
calling. Yeah, it's like Paul Jenkins, obviously another famous ex-Marvel creator, who I know goes on Billy's streams a lot over on the Pop XP. He is from South London as well, and I went on a stream with him and Billy a couple of weeks ago when they were looking at they sort of did a bit of a Battle of Britain Friday, and they were obviously advertising my mailing list, which was lovely of them, and we was just discussing different things about London. And bear in mind, we had never spoken before that. He hasn't lived in South London for a very, very long time, yet that part of you just still resonated out. And I have no doubt that in Charlie's life, if he bumped into anybody who was from South London, no matter how long he hadn't lived in South London, there was still that little boy in him that would have been able to completely gravitate to have that conversation with that person, which I think is absolutely astounding.
Well, it's a work that I'm definitely looking forward to getting, and I hope that everybody in the chat will hit the link, get on that mailing list, and once you do launch, we'd love to have you back to do our little part to help push one or two backers to get in there and make sure that this thing gets funded, because I think it definitely deserves to be funded.
Thank you so much. I'd love to come back, not even for that, just to talk about this again. It makes me super excited for it. So I'm happy just to talk about it. With or without the backers, I'm just happy to be here. So that's completely
If you have
fine.
an open night that you're bored and you want to talk, I'll throw up an open mic just to get it out there. I know you've got to go because I think it's CG Ladies Night.
It is. I've
CG
got to
Ladies
go.
Night over on graded 0.5. So
no, it's on Mandy's channel Mandy Summers' channel tonight. Yeah,
it's a migrating show.
We move. Yeah, it's on each one of ours. It rotates. So next week it'll be Piper, and then the week after it will be on my channel. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right, so everybody change the channel. That's an anachronism from the old TV days. Change the channel over to Mandy Summers' channel. Get over there and get some more Charlie's London there, and as well as Piper and Mandy, and we should have Mandy here in about a couple of weeks too to talk about Super Dead. So looking forward to that. I will let you go get you some vocal rest so you can chat up the stream there. And thank you for everybody in the chat for coming. We will be out.
Bye.
Hi. Thanks for stopping by for another Critical Blast video. The internet is a big place, and we know there are lots of other places you could be other than here, and we appreciate you being here immensely. If you enjoyed this kind of content, we hope you'll return for more. If you click the subscribe button, you'll get a little notification of when we produce new video content. If you would like to help the channel out, there are many ways to do so. Just visiting our main hub, criticalblast.com, will do wonders. But if you're more of a show me the merchandise type of person, there are links in the description of this video to our t-shirt shop, as well as links to Amazon for the books we publish under the Critical Blast Publishing imprint, including the urban fantasy anthology Gods and Services and the YA superhero novel Bulletproof by Stephen J. Mitchell. Thanks again for visiting this video. We hope you had a blast.